Hi and welcome along to AFTV News Daily. We are back here after our win at the weekend, and I've got a very special guest joining me today. You'll be very familiar with him if you know anything about politics. He's the former Speaker of the House of Commons. You always hear him say, "Order, order!" But no need. Did I do that good?
You did it very well.
Is that a good impression?
Oh, you can have another go. Go on. But
Order!
You did it extremely well. Yes. As many R's as possible, Robbie. So, order. Order. And I thought that was an extremely good effort on your part.
Oh,
I
thank
think
you.
that if Arsenal fan TV enthusiasts are decent people with a proper appreciation of good pronunciation, you should be getting at least an 8 out of 10.
Oh, thank you very much. But that's not all we got you here for. We got you here for because you are a massive Arsenal fan, a massive gooner. I see you at so many games. I love the fact that when you're at the games, you know what I mean, even when you did used to be in the House of Commons, I mean, sometimes the first time I saw you, I didn't even recognise you because you're out of all your sort of gear and you got your Arsenal stuff on and you're there with your son.
Yeah.
And you're a really passionate Arsenal fan. So I was like, we've got to get you on the show.
Well, thank you.
We've got to get you on the show, and it's brilliant to have you on today.
I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I congratulate you on acquiring this studio, and I've met a couple of your team today. I don't want to spook or discombobulate them by mentioning them by name, but I'm afraid I feel tempted to do so. Don Robbie, I do feel tempted to do so. I've just met Olivia and Harvey.
Good
They're
guys.
both absolutely brimming with enthusiasm at the idea and the reality of working at Arsenal Fan TV under, I'm told, a benevolent, kindly, good-natured and patient boss.
Oh, I'll take that.
What's not to like about working at Arsenal
They
Fan
never
TV?
told me that, but you know, I'll take that. But you know what? It's great to have you on, and you know, you're not in the House of Commons at the moment. What are you up to these days?
Well, I've got a portfolio career now. I suppose that's the best way of describing or encapsulating it, Robbie. So I spend some time doing business activity. I'm a non-executive director of a sports business. I spend a good deal of time public speaking to commercial audiences, both in the UK and elsewhere. That's been interrupted somewhat by COVID, but it's resuscitated of late. So I'm doing quite a lot of that. I'm going to Holland next month, and I'll be going to Germany later in the year as well. And then my kids tease me. They tease me about the fact that I'm a part-time professor of politics at London University. So I do that. I've got a couple of charitable involvements, and in case any of your Arsenal Fan TV people is remotely interested, I'm on Cameo, which is an American video platform.
Yep,
so
no, Cameo.
I do quite a lot of work with and for Cameo. But as far as I'm concerned, there's not much point in leaving a role unless you're going to do something different, not only in terms of the focus of your activity, but in terms of allocation of time and keeping some time for oneself, which I think is important. I mean, even when I was speaker, I always used to try to get to the games far more often than not. Now that I'm no longer in professional politics and I'm working more when I want to work, I'm absolutely obsessed with protecting time for the things that I enjoy. Time with my family, time watching Arsenal, time with my other enthusiasm of watching or trying to play tennis. So I think that's very good for, to some degree, perhaps one's physical health when one's playing sport, but mainly it's about protecting one's mental health and having time with one's friends and joshing about important issues and experiencing the joy of a great goal or a great save or a great release from adversity, whatever it may be. And so I loved my time in Parliament, but do I miss it? I don't miss it. I hugely enjoyed it. It was an enormous privilege. I made friends, I incurred enemies, I pleased some people, I displeased others. But the one thing I've got in common very much with you and with all of the fans of this show is that I'm absolutely passionate about Arsenal. I have been since I was 8 years old, and I'm now 58 years old. And for the last 50 years, I've been obsessed with Arsenal. And I will go on being obsessed with Arsenal, which doesn't mean I'm altogether happy at the moment with Arsenal, but I remain obsessed with, devoted to, excited about, and always in support of Arsenal.
You said about mental health. I mean, You know, the first 3 games of the season wouldn't have been very good for your mental health at all, watching Arsenal. I mean,
No.
3 defeats, you know, conceding 9 goals. But you know what? We picked it up a little bit. And another win at the weekend. 1-0 to the Arsenal, that famous old 1-0 to the Arsenal. A 1-0 win at Burnley. And, you know, we're starting to slowly progress.
Yeah, I agree. And that old and quite resonant phrase, 1-0 to the Arsenal, goes back decades, as you'll be aware. It often used to be said slightly derisively about the club, as if it was something of a criticism, a sneer, if you like, a sort of diminution of the quality of the club, that people would say, oh, well, they could only manage to scrounge or manufacture, eke out a 1-0 win. Well, in a different context, a completely different context in politics, talking about majorities in Parliament and what you needed, Winston Churchill used to say, 1 is enough. Now, what he meant by that was, well, having a majority of 1 was better than having no majority at all or being in deficit. And in the end, okay, it makes a difference to the goal difference, and that is or can be important. But what really matters is getting the points on the board. And I rather agree with you that there is some ground for a tad of optimism, because...
A tad?
Well, just a trifle. I wouldn't put it much more strongly than that, but we did earn that victory at Burnley. And even though Burnley are low down in the league, it's the sort of game that can be very tough, because it's a very physical side, and they're not particularly creative, but they're on the whole quite solid. And, you know, it's a tough away fixture. And I'm sorry to say it's the sort of fixture that Arsenal have sometimes struggled with over the years. Our overall record against Burnley is good, but we sometimes struggle in those matches.
A lot of them games we can't
walk away from the conflict, if you like. So
yeah.
I'm pleased at least that the team got stuck in, and we didn't just salvage something, which would have been a draw. You know, we got that victory, and the Ødegaard free kick was exquisite. It was a majestic goal. So I'm pleased about that, but I am quite concerned more widely that it's very early days, and whereas I was a great admirer of Arsene Wenger, perhaps he stayed too long, and there were criticisms to be made of him and mistakes that occurred during his tenure at the club. Nevertheless, he commanded huge respect. And I do remember saying back in 2017 to you, amidst the chorus of execration against him, and people saying, well, he should go a week tomorrow, or he should have gone last week or last month or last year, be careful of what you wish for. It's very easy for people simply to clamour for an alternative, but unless that alternative has been thought fully through, and that alternative person has got the full range of skills needed to lead a great club, it can be very challenging. And I think, to be honest, the jury is out. I don't remotely doubt Mikel Arteta's dedication, and he was, of course, a loyal and dedicated servant of the club as a player. I didn't think he was a great player for the club, but he was a dedicated and loyal, capable servant of the club. He doesn't, of course, have a managerial record at the highest level. You know, he's been the number 2 under Pep Guardiola, and obviously he gained something from that. But coming in to lead a club of the stature, reputation and expectations of Arsenal is a pretty tough gig, and I think the jury's out, is what I would want to say.
You don't sound too impressed.
I think that we've got a long way to go. Look, there are some good things about the team. If we accentuate the positives, I think Bukayo Saka is a terrific player, and I think Arteta has shown that he's committed to him, and he's giving him his head and his opportunities to play where he wants to play, with the style and expression that he wants to deploy, and I think that's a good thing. I think the way in which he's integrated Emile Smith-Rowe into the team is a positive, and of course it's a huge tribute to Smith-Rowe, but it is a tribute to some degree to the managerialism of Mikel Arteta. So those are good things, and I think he's also very, very, very properly and beneficially recognised one of the most magnificent players in the Premier League today, and that's Kieran Tierney. I think Tierney's got real leadership potential. On the negative side, well, I think we've spent a lot of money, and I'm not sure that we are getting value for it. That's one concern I have. I don't know what Arsenal Fan TV viewers think, but I'm just a bit concerned that that was a big spend of, £142 million during the off-season, and I don't know whether we will extract the maximum juice from the orange. I think it's not altogether auspicious in terms of signs at the moment. I think there's a problem that, frankly, Robbie, it's not obvious to me. If it is to others, educate me. It's not obvious to me that there's a captain on that pitch. I don't see someone in the mould or of the quality or remotely to compare with, say, Tony Adams, or going back a long way, in the 1970s, somebody like Frank McClintock. It seems to me that there isn't somebody who's really galvanising and motivating and encouraging and nurturing and bringing people together and deploying each for the benefit of his talents and the benefit of the team. It seems to me that very often there are 11 people on the pitch, and they're not necessarily completely rudderless, but they're not obviously led. Yeah. And it isn't immediately apparent to me, and sometimes even after 90 minutes, it's not apparent to me what the game plan was. So
a lot of people have been saying that. A lot of people have been complaining and saying the one thing that under Mikel Arteta so far is that they don't really know what the style is of Arsenal. Under Arsene Wenger, you knew what the style was. Under Mikel Arteta, he's not really established that yet. You don't really know what is Arsenal's style.
No. You would like to think there's a brand of football that you could say, well, that's Arteta's Arsenal.
Yeah.
And I don't at the moment see it. Now, it may be, and perhaps I should be suitably modest about this. I'm not normally modest, but perhaps I should be suitably modest because I'm not an expert, that it is there and I haven't detected it. But of course, we can all see that Mikel Arteta likes the team to play out from the back, and if you can do it confidently and consummately, well, then that's obviously a great thing to do, as opposed to just kicking the ball long and hoping for the best and almost certainly feeding it to the other side. So there is merit in that if it is done skillfully and in a coordinated way. I think the movement forward from back to front lacks something. I think there's a real missing ingredient. It's too slow, there's too much back passing and going round, in diagonals or triangles, and very often then retreating slightly defensively and so on. And I don't think that enough players have their marching orders or their clear sense of instructions as to what they're supposed to be doing. How are you going to progress from, let's say, central defence to those positions in which you can really open up space and get behind defenders? And I don't sense that the team as a whole has always got a very clear idea of how that's to be done. I think individuals are displaying what I would call sort of personal entrepreneurship, in the sense that they're enterprising and thrusting and having a go and getting forward, and people who are playing almost as wing backs and then coming forward very well. Saka has done that, Tierney has done that. But overall, I think there's quite a lot missing. And of course, to be fair to Arteta, and this is true for any manager, grappling with all the complexities of putting together a team that reinforces each other, he's had his fair share of injuries with which to contend. I mean, Thomas Partey, I think, is a really good player. Good to see him performing to powerful effect.
He's good at the weekend.
Sunday. I mean, that's great. But, since he joined us, he's been really cursed by injury. Really good, really talented, really focused, really positive player. But if you're not fit, you can't play. So we do need a little bit of a changing fortune in that sense.
Lots of comments coming in.
Oh gosh!
Right? Yeah.
Have I angered or infuriated people already?
No, they're loving you. Max Banks says order. There's lots of orders.
Max Banks, I trust you're listening to the rest of the show. Don't go toddling off now, man, just because you've had your moment. I'm issuing to you an edict, an instruction. Yes, you've guessed it, man. An order. That you will remain listening to this programme for the duration. And if I get message that you have not done so, there'll be hell to pay, man.
I love this. Right, and Jimmy Gomez says, I love hearing John. My IQ is going up, he says, just while listening to you. Right? Baker Rashier says, hi, Robbie and John. Question for John. Speaking positives and negatives, does Arteta know his best 11 or even formation? Also, 3 or 4 at the back versus Spurs. Do you think he knows his best formation yet? He does chop and change a lot. I mean, let's give it up for Arteta. I think he got it right at the weekend. I noticed that at the weekend, Tomiyasu, the new Japanese right back, I was very impressed with. He didn't get forward a lot.
Yeah.
He sort of sat back, to to deal with that threat of Burnley, where we know Burnley are going to whip loads of crosses into the box.
Yeah.
He played really well. So I thought his tactics were really good at the weekend, Mikel Arteta, but he does chop and change a lot, don't he?
I don't know that he's decided in his own mind, in answer to your question, what that best formation is. Now, of course, there is an argument for saying that it can, if not rotate, vary to a degree depending upon the side that you're playing, depend on the physicality of the side that you're facing, almost literally on the height of the players that you're up against and so on. So I don't think you have to have an absolutely set plan, but I would have thought that you want to have a general preference as to what is your best. And in answer to the question, I don't think there is that yet. Do I favour 3 or 4? I am probably the least qualified person to say, and you may shout me down for my pessimism or negativity. I would say, praying in aid, the importance of a good defensive framework, the word caution, I would argue that against Tottenham we would be wise to have a back 4. Now, maybe there will be people who will say that that's too defensive, too negative, too lacking in positivity or whatever, but I just think that you're asking for trouble against a team that has got some seriously strong attacking players like Song, like Harry Kane, who do, when they're both playing well, have a great understanding. I think we're asking for trouble if we've got only 3 people at the back.
I agree with you. Same says, as a captain is equal measures, competence and leadership, and so far our captains have either one or neither. So he says one or the other or neither. I don't also necessarily believe that a captain must be experienced, but just influential. You, as a person that's, you've been a leader of the house, what do you think? What is a captain? What should our Arsenal captain need? Because there's a lot of debates around who should be captain. Of course, it's Aubameyang at the moment, but he's not a vocal guy. He's not you don't see that he doesn't look like he's more like a player who's going to lead by example.
Yes.
You've got Kieran Tierney, a lot of people are suggesting. Somebody was saying to me at the weekend, Thomas Partey could possibly be a captain. You've also got a lot of young players that have captained, like Martin Odegaard, captains for Norway.
Yeah.
You've got Sambi Lokonga, used to be the captain of Anderlecht.
Yeah.
So, but what makes a good captain for you?
I think a good captain has got to be unselfish and focused on the performance of the team as a whole, with an appreciation, therefore, of who's good at what and who needs to cover for whom, who should be where when. So you need somebody who's got a vision of the totality of the situation. You need somebody who's got an appreciation of what's going on and what you should attempt to make happen across the pitch, not just in his part of the pitch, not just narrowly, if you like, in his domain, but viewing the team performance as a whole. So that person is what I would call a leader. And don't get me wrong, I'm not here to make some coruscating criticism of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. Yes, he's been having a difficult time, and that's a pity. It's a pity that his slump in form coincided with the signing of the new contract and so on. But he's fundamentally a great guy and a terrific servant of the club, and the performances are getting better again. But I don't view him as a captain. I felt that he was made the captain perhaps because he was at one point the highest scorer and probably the most popular player in the team. My own view, if I had to pick somebody now, would be, as I said to you before we came on air, Kieran Tierney seems to me, I may be wrong, to be a leader figure. I feel he's quite vocal and could probably be encouraged to be more vocal. I don't know him, but my sense is that he would have an assertive personality. He's demanding of himself, and I think he would be both encouraging and demanding of the team. And I just have this sense that he could impose his personality on the team. What I love about Tierney, most of all, is not even, Robbie, his talent. Great talent, great speed, great vision, great passing ability, great runs down the left, all the rest of it. No, what I love about Kieran Tierney is that I feel that guy looks proud to wear the shirt. And he goes on that pitch, and from the moment he goes on until the moment he comes off, He is working. So he's much more than a workhorse. Of course, he's got huge gifts and talents and so on. But to me, I've always said this, not just in sport, but in business and in politics and in the theatrical world, in so many different walks of life, success is a combination of inspiration, for which read talent, ability, skill set, and perspiration, for which read hard work, indefatigability, never say die. I refuse to lose. And I've always felt that that second set of qualities, covered by the term perspiration, is at least as important as the first. You've got all sorts of people who are talented, sure. Mesut Ozil was very talented, but I didn't always feel that the work rate and the stickability, the willingness to get stuck in, for example, to the tackle, was there. Whereas I feel with Kieran Tierney that this is a guy who's fearless, who gives it 100% and more. And I just feel that he would have the capacity to mobilise and inspire the team as a whole. But I'd be really interested to know what other people think.
Okay, let us know your captains. We've got a little problem with audio here.
Yeah, we'll come back in like.
We're back, John. There was a slight little issue with the audio, but we're back here. I was just looking at this real funny comment here from Green Monkey. It was, I think he's commenting on what you were sort of saying about Arteta, and he said, this is as close to Arteta out as you'll get from a politician. He wasn't exactly saying that you want him out, but you said the jury's still out for him.
I do think the jury's out, and I think that in the modern age, you're never going to have a manager who serves as long as Arsene Wenger did, or indeed as Alex Ferguson did. That world has gone.
Yeah.
The club's fans expect results. I don't say that it's all down...
Are we too impatient?
To Arteta? No, I think that we're entitled to be impatient. I think that, are we too impatient? Look, I think you have to reckon with certain realities. I mean, I'm told that Per Mertesacker has just said that he thinks that we'll be back in the Champions League in 2 to 3 years. I didn't observe the interview, but I'm told that's what he said.
I mean, he
Do
has
I
said
sniff at that? No, I don't sniff at that. I mean, apart from anything else,
2 to 3
Mertesacker
years.
was a terrific servant of the club, and I admire him, and his judgment, I think, is sound. So he may be right, but do I think that we should settle for that? I don't. I mean, he may be right that it's that way off and that it won't be achieved.
I mean, they're trying to be realistic,
and I respect that. But I think
2 to 3 years, Arsenal.
I think too often the problem is that the club gives the impression of being satisfied with staying roughly where it's been for a period of years. That's particularly true, of course, in terms of the Premier League. So for far too long, in my opinion, we were satisfied with just scraping into the top 4. And even over the last few years, when we've not been in the top 4, I have sensed, and I think this has almost been inhaled by a lot of Arsenal fans, that the ownership of the club isn't unduly ruffled by our subpar performances. Now, Stan Kroenke may say that's not true and that he's extremely concerned about it and that it worries him greatly. But as far as communication is concerned, I think most fans get the impression that the ownership is relatively relaxed. Robbie, I'm not relaxed. I'm not relaxed at all. I am passionate about my club. I will always go, and I love to cheer, and I'll holler in support, and I'll sit through each match to the bitter end. And even when we play badly or don't make the effort that I think is required, I'll always come back because I'm addicted to Arsenal. But I'm not remotely satisfied. And I have to say, I also feel, and I don't know whether people viewing will agree with me, that the club is owned by people who do not evince a notable passion for football. They seem to me to be principally concerned with the phenomenon of shareholder return, which seems to me a very second-order matter. I know we have to be run in a business-like way, but as far as I'm concerned, football should not primarily be viewed as a business. football should be viewed as something about which people are passionate. They want their club to do better, to climb the ladder, to make headway, to win silverware. And the idea that it should just be viewed in business terms seems to me to be quite wrong. And I'm very conscious other clubs are owned by people who clearly have a passion for and a knowledge of and an interest in, and, dare I say it, an attendance at their club's matches. Mr. Kroenke appears possibly in a leap year, or maybe slightly more often than that. He may turn up once a year or so. But I do not get the impression that he's a tribune, that he's a person of the people as far as Arsenal fans are concerned. He may be an immensely accomplished business person, but he doesn't demonstrate to me that he's passionate about football. And I want this club to be owned and led and shoved and motivated and pushed and exhorted and cajoled and encouraged to go forward and do better. That's what I want. And I don't see that in the ownership of the club.
What do you think, though, that this summer he has put his money where his mouth is? He's given Mikel Arteta a lot of money to spend. We spent the most money, as a matter of fact, of any club in world football in the summer. Do you look on it and say too little, too late? Or do you look on it and say, well, maybe they're changing, maybe they're...
It's a start. I mean, it's a start. No, I do think it's too little, too late, in the sense that you can't do anything about the past, and I think we could have done much better over the last 5 years than we've done, and I'm afraid I still feel a considerable anger about the European Super League fiasco, because that seemed to me to be a denial and a repudiation of the values of sport. And the fact that Stan Kroenke was very much a cheerleader for that project is something that I greatly rue, and about which I admit I am extremely critical. I think he was totally wrong to be involved in that, and it spoke volumes that that was his commitment. But the past is the past. Yes, it's better that some investment is made than not, but I suppose saying to you and to your viewers, I'm not sure yet whether that investment is going to pay off. You can have talented individual players, but you have to have them coming together cohesively as a team. And it comes back to that question of formations and game style. And it's not clear to me that we've yet got a definitive view about what our majority formation should be, or what our preferred game style is to be. And unless there's clarity of thought about those things, it's very difficult to envisage the development of a consistent record of good performance.
Would you like him to sell it? There's been a couple of people come in. There's been Daniel Ek, the Spotify guy. There was rumours the other day that some guys from Qatar were interested.
I would love the club to be owned by people who are really passionate about Arsenal football.
It's not just about the money for you. It's about someone coming in and having a love, the same love that you have.
Yes. I mean, I remember, for example, a number of times in the past going to Leicester. And tragically, as you know, the Leicester owner died. He was adored. He was almost worshipped and judged a hero by Leicester fans, because he threw himself and his family threw themselves. They all threw their energies into the club. And I suppose what I would say if I were talking to Mr. Kroenke, which I don't expect to do, and I'm sure he's not remotely interested in my views, is if you really care, show it, prove it, turn up, take an interest, engage. And he may well say, oh, well, Mr. Bercow's wrong, I'm doing all of those things. But I don't see the evidence
because he
of
doesn't
that.
show up.
And he certainly doesn't show up with any frequency. And I have a sense that a lot of fans feel that the club is owned by people who, in a sense, know the price of everything and the value of nothing. And I don't get the impression that they live in that family, that they live, eat, sleep or breathe the values of Arsenal Football Club. Maybe you'll consider me a dewy-eyed romantic or some sort of outdated fossil in taking this attitude, but as far as I'm concerned, the club should be owned by people who are potty about the club.
I agree with you
So
completely.
I would like to see, I could never do it, but I'd like to see a collection of people perhaps, if not one individual, maybe a consortium of people who
Come on, you
can
know
attract the resources.
You know important people, come on.
I wish I knew people who got the resources required.
You know important people, come on.
I occasionally say to people that I know, why don't you come together with X or Y or Z and see if you can launch a bid to own the club? Because one thing I know about you guys, no names, no pack drill, is that you really care about the club. You're motivated to turn up. You talk Arsenal. You live Arsenal. You breathe Arsenal. You smile when Arsenal win and you almost cry when Arsenal lose. And I think those are the people that you want at the heart of a football club. You only live once, as we know, or I probably grammatically should say you live only once. And so when you live, you want to be cheering a team for which you know the people at the top are cheering. And when your team loses, you want the people at the top to take it as hard and view it as seriously as you do. And at the moment, I just don't have that feeling.
Yeah, this guy in Menace of Society says the LA Rams more important to the Kroenkes than Arsenal. He's probably right. That is their club over there in America. But we, like you said, we want to see the passion here.
I don't mean any discourtesy to the LA Rams, but I'll be absolutely honest with your viewer. I couldn't give a flying flamingo about the LA Rams, but I could give a flying flamingo about Arsenal Football Club.
100%.
So, maybe I'm taking a rather parochial view. Maybe if I lived in Los Angeles, I would be a fan of the LA Rams. That may very well be. We're all the creatures of circumstance and we depend upon our background. I became an Arsenal fan because I was born and brought up in North London, and you were likely to be either an Arsenal or a Tottenham fan. I became an Arsenal fan in January 1971 at the age of 8, and the memories started then, and that's what I'm passionate about. And I don't say that people can't own more than one club or own an institution in different sports. Of course they can, but the one that I'm concerned about is Arsenal. And
100%.
I would like to think that the dedicated focus of the ownership was not on some other club in some other sport in some other part of the world. What I want Mr. Kroenke and his family to be focused on is the performance, the potential, the prospects and the prospective achievements of this great club, which he is extremely privileged to own in North London, called Arsenal Football Club. That is what matters. And as Bill Shankly famously said, and I rather identify with this is his British attitude, sort of playing the game, that's what really matters, doesn't matter if you win or lose, just sort of playing the game, sort of British code, so forth, you just take part. Rubbish. I rather agree with Bill Shankly when he said, people say that football's a matter of life and death. No, it's more important than that.
Let's get through some of these. There's so many comments coming in. Adininia says, big up guys, respect to John. We need a captain that will not divide the dressing room. Xhaka was a captain before Aubameyang was named as captain to ease the tension. So he sort of thinks that maybe Aubameyang sort of came in to ease the tension in the dressing room is what he's saying.
Well, if that be so, that's a stopgap. I can understand that reasoning, that Granit Xhaka was not thought to be the right person to be the captain, and Aubameyang would be regarded as a more unifying and perhaps emollient figure. But emollients, well, soothing, gentle words.
These words are too big for me, John, man. Emollient. I've never heard that one before. Jeez.
I beg your pardon.
I don't get the dictionary out.
I beg your pardon.
I love that
it's
one.
a good quality. It's a good quality to be an emollient person, but I'm not sure that it's a great quality in the leader of a team in a fast-moving sport.
Yeah.
In fact, I would go so far as to say I think it is not the right quality. And I admire Aubameyang. I think he's got a huge contribution to make. I respect him, and we can all celebrate his talents, but I just don't regard him as a leader figure. I may be wrong, but I don't regard him as a leader figure.
Okay, JIDF32 says, Xhaka's the captain, simple as. Remember you guys said Aubameyang would make a better captain. What's with this obsession to convince the fan base that Xhaka isn't the dressing room leader? They even voted him that. He's the leader, but the thing with Xhaka, I look at him sometimes and say, you can see his leadership qualities. You see him talking on the pitch. You see him, he does look like a guy that gets concerned when things are going wrong.
Yeah.
You see it when he's at Switzerland as well, but then I see things like what he did at Man City the other day. And I'm like, is that your leader? when you're 2-0 down.
I mean, I'm not as critical
part
of him as some people are. Some people are very critical of him. I'm
Where do
not
you stand
as
on
critical, but I think that his biggest weakness, and we've all got our weaknesses, but we're not all paid millions of pounds to play for Arsenal. His biggest weakness is that he's impetuous. You know, his temperament is poor. He lashes out, and when he lashes out recklessly and
cost the team
expensively, the team loses. It's not just he whose reputation suffers, about which he may not be that bothered. You know, you're only as good as your last match, and he'll serve his suspension, then he'll come back, and he may well put in a good performance and so on, and you can always recover. But what you can't do is recover the points that you lost as a result of his folly. Now, does it automatically follow that somebody who's once been sent off can never be the captain of a team? No.
But
unfortunately, he's been sent off a number of times.
Loads of times.
Booked too regularly. And I just think that there's a temperamental weakness there. I see it as a character flaw. So I wouldn't damn him to perdition. Some people do and say, oh, he shouldn't be in the Arsenal team at all. I can think of a number of people I know who take that view. I'm not quite as damning about him as that, because I do think he sometimes puts in good performances and he's gutsy, but I think he's impetuous. And so, I mean, I respect the position of the person who says, well, Xhaka should be the captain of the team, but my own personal view, which I floated tonight, it's not an original view, but it is my preferred view, is that there would be a lot to be said for nurturing Kieran Tierney in that role, particularly if, to put it bluntly, and this is rather crucial, he's up for it. No, I don't know whether he's up for it.
I reckon he
I don't know whether he's going to be asked whether he's up for it. But
looks like that guy
I
would
think
be up
he's
for it.
the sort of person who wouldn't duck, or, if I may take the mickey out of my own name, he wouldn't burk a challenge.
David says, need John Bercow on the Arsenal board to usher in the Spotify owner. Yeah, I'm surprised. You've never been asked to go on the Arsenal board?
I have not, no. I have not.
Somebody, you know, with the importance of you, they've never asked you to...
I have not been approached about that, no. I want to thank that person, whoever it is. Very kind of you to promote my...
David DSA.
...claims. David DSA, thank you for that. But I'm almost speechless. I'm very rarely completely speechless, as you know, but I'm almost numbed into silence by this observation. I've never been approached about that. But I suppose what I would say is...
Especially now, you know what I mean? Come on, Arsenal.
I love the club.
He's not really, you know, well, he's doing a lot of what he described earlier, but I'm sure if somebody came from the Arsenal board and said, come on, John, we need people, actually, we need fans on the board. We need people like you who've got that passion. That's what's lacking. You know, so I'm going to move on with some other comments here. Reece says, Palace fan here, Crystal Palace fan here. Do you think he'll do well? How important is it, he says, to have another...
Sorry, this person says he's a Crystal Palace fan.
Yeah.
Can I offer my sympathies to you, sir? We've all got our problems in life, and I realise that this must be a challenging experience for you, and I don't bear you any ill will. But it is something with which you have to wrestle every day, and it may well cause you some disquiet from time to time. It may be challenging for your life experience to be a Crystal Palace fan, but I say that more in sorrow than in anger. And I now look forward with interest and enthusiasm to whatever it is that you want to lob at me.
Well, he's not lobbing it. He's saying, he says, how important is it to have another black manager in the Premier League? And could he be the future Arsenal manager? Of course, he's talking about Patrick Vieira. Not doing too badly so far. Did lose at the weekend, but not doing too bad.
Well, I'm in favour of greater diversity in sport and in society. You didn't invite me on your programme, Robbie, to talk about what I did as speaker, and I don't intend to dwell on that. But I can say that diversity and inclusion was a big theme for me. I did everything I could as speaker to try to change the staff profile of the House. Traditionally, in very senior positions, there'd been a disproportionately large number of white, middle-aged, middle to upper middle class, and in some cases aristocratic men in key positions. Not many women in key positions, very few BAME representatives in key positions. I appointed the first female and BAME Speaker's Chaplain, who's now the Bishop of Dover, Rose Hudson-Wilkin. In the history of the House of Commons, I appointed the first female and BAME Speaker's Counsel, senior lawyer in the House. I appointed the first BAME Sergeant-at-Arms in the history of the House, and the second Speaker's Chaplain was also a BAME woman. So I made lots of those appointments on merit. on merit, because I thought those were the best candidates for the job. At the time, particularly in the early years, there was controversy, and some of the right-wing press flayed me and vilified me and said, oh, he's just ticking boxes and being politically correct and so on. They volunteered their views based on complete ignorance of the subject matter under consideration. They didn't know who the candidates were or anything, but they just sort of said, oh, Bercow's just doing this as a gesture. No, I was doing it because I wanted the House of Commons to look more like the country that we were charged to represent. And, you know, modern Britain is a multiracial society, thank goodness. And I thought we need to have far more women and far more BAME people in senior positions. So naturally, I want that in sport as well, and I'd love to see that in football. As to whether Patrick Vieira would become manager of Arsenal at some stage, I don't know. The one thing I do want to say about Vieira, whom I had the privilege of meeting once a few years ago, is this. That guy, to my mind, as well as being an Arsenal hero, an Arsenal legend, an Arsenal dynamo, is an Arsenal man through and through. So, of course, he went elsewhere, as we know, but I've always felt that his DNA is Arsenal. And do I think it's possible that he could become manager of Arsenal?
If he does well at Palace.
I do.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely possible that he could. But, I mean, let's see how Arteta gets on. I wish Mikel Arteta all the best, as we all do. We want him to succeed. But I'm just being honest with you. I don't think there's much point in coming on the programme and giving you dishonest or dissembling or disingenuous answers. If you ask me straight questions, I'll give you straight answers. And my feeling about Arteta is that the jury's out, and I'm not yet sure whether he has got that mix of qualities, that sort of fusion of different talents that you need to be a top manager at the very highest level. Has Patrick Vieira? Patrick Vieira, I suspect, would have quite a lot of support amongst Arsenal fans. But, you know, you can always do a poll of Arsenal fan TV viewers, if you like, and you can establish that. But my hunch is that he would probably be a very popular figure amongst our fans.
Well, if he can prove himself at Palace, you never know. Jared says he's from across the pond, right? And he says, can you please have John Bercow give us an order, please? Best politician ever. I miss watching videos of the house every day.
Order! Order! Jared, you may be across the pond, man, but your behaviour will be inspected, and I imagine that reports will be forthcoming if you conduct yourself in a delinquent manner. Order! Order! I require no backchat from you, no ranting, no barracking, no heckling, no chuntering from a sedentary position, and no use of any unparliamentary language. So I trust you will accept my order in the spirit in which it is volunteered. Be a good man!
You heard it there, you heard it, right? Same Jay says, I think we're getting close to defining a formation. A back four, goalkeeper, CDM are now all sealed. What we need now is real tests. He says, more so than Burnley away, and we desperately need Aubameyang to return to form. I think you made some good points there.
Aubameyang, sorry, please.
I was just going to say, Aubameyang returning to form is key, isn't it?
Aubameyang returning to form is key. And for what it's worth, my feeling on the whole is that Aubameyang is at his best down the middle.
You think?
You know, I think you've got to try to get him to break through down the middle. But, you know, he's scored great goals from different positions, but he needs the service. And I traditionally thought that he forged a very good partnership with Alex Lacazette. So, again, other people may take a different view. And, of course, you've got to work with what you've got and who's fit to play, and depending on perhaps the defensive combination of other teams. But I always like it when Aubameyang and Lacazette are on together, because I feel they've got a good understanding. It seems to me that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts with those two. And so I always think it's a pity if one of them is playing and the other's on the bench, or one comes off for the other. It seems much more sensible to try to fuse the different abilities of the two and the understanding that I think they have. But is Aubameyang returning to form and scoring 20 goals plus this season almost imperative if we're going to bid for the top four? I think it's got to be, because it's very difficult to see who else is going to score that number of goals, with the possible exception of Alex Lacazette himself, and he's often not starting. So you really do have to ask, well, what are the numbers we're looking for and who's likely to get them? Bukayo Saka will score a bit, and he'll also create and assist because that's part of the artistry of the guy. And Emile Smith-Rowe is developing all the time.
Maybe.
Pepe a bit. Yeah. Pepe, I think at his best is terrific. My criticism of Pepe, I'm sorry to be critical because on occasion he's fantastic, is that perhaps slightly comparable with, analogous to Mesut Ozil, Pepe plays well 30% of the time, and I would like to see him play well 70% of the time. That's my caveat, if you like. That's my reservation about Pepe. Has he got ability? Well, we know he's got ability. Can he produce? We know he can produce. Does he sufficiently frequently do so? No. Has he yet, if I can put it bluntly, and talk about the matter of filthy lucre, that is to say money, has he yet justified his £72 million transfer fee? Well, manifestly, he hasn't.
No, he's got a long way to go to do that, but he's improving. The North London derby, of course, is coming up this weekend. Looking forward to it?
I'm in a state of almost uncontrollable excitement, Robbie, about that upcoming game. Oh, most definitely. Yes, I wouldn't want to miss that one, and I won't be missing that one. I'll be there.
The thing about that game, I know you'll be there, and the thing about that game is, even despite the terrible start to the season we've had, if we were to win that game, we'd be on the same amount of points as Spurs.
Yes.
Because they've got back-to-back lost 3-0 to Palace, lost 3-0. I mean, they got destroyed yesterday against Chelsea.
Yes. Second half, I mean, they were completely out of it. Change of formation, change of tactics, brilliantly brought about at the break. And Chelsea completely dominated that second half after, to be fair, in the first half, Tottenham were very much in the ascendant. So that was a real turnaround, and I think that must have been splendidly bad for Tottenham's morale. Splendidly bad, I repeat. Not that I want to rub it in, but I do. Splendidly bad for Tottenham's morale. So we've got ruthlessly to exploit the fact that they've had a couple of bad games in succession. And as you say, although our goal difference is significantly worse, we would at least be on level points with them.
Hold on, is it even significantly worse now? Because they've had 2 back-to-back 3-0s.
3-0s, wait a minute. Oh, no, wait a minute. It's 2 back-to-backs, and they won their first... No, wait a minute. They won their first
won all
3
the games
games
1-0,
didn't they? Yeah, you're right. So that's 3 and now 6 against. So
similar.
They're sort of -3.
Yeah.
Yes, but we're currently on... I think we're currently on -7. So we need to... Well, that's actually a good incentive. Arsenal should strive, Robbie. Thank you for encouraging me and displaying your prowess in mental arithmetic, which is very considerably superior to my own. Yeah, what we've got to go for, let's be absolutely clear, what we've got to go for then is a 5-0 win against Tottenham.
I'd love that.
Did you hear that, Arsenal Fan TV viewers? That's what we need, a 5-0 win.
I like that. That's what we should be going for. But looking at that game now, I mean, that's a winnable game. It's a chance for Mikel Arteta to really start turning things around, isn't it? Because get a win in the North London derby, the feel-good factor.
I agree.
Would
be almost worth 6 points rather than 3. I mean, not in the table it isn't, obviously, we know that. But in terms of the fillip to morale, it's hard to overstate. And in recent years, we've struggled in the derby game. I don't really count pre-season friendlies because I just don't think that they matter. They're the equivalent of an exhibition match in tennis. They just don't count as part of the record. When last we played in the league, we got the 2-1 victory, if memory serves me correctly, and that was important. And I think we've got to reflect on what we did well that day. There needs to be, the most painstaking, rigorous, searching video analysis of Tottenham's recent games, which I'm sure there will be. The players have all got to know what they're on that pitch to do. There's got to be a very clear game plan. And, part of it has to be, if you're going to win the game, greater precision and success at transitioning from back to the front of the pitch. I think that's been a real weakness, that we've often been always loitering with no clear intent in the middle of the park, and you just haven't had people breaking forward with sufficient speed or purpose, and we're going to have to be able to do that whilst having a decent defensive line, if we're going to score. And,
this is an important game.
A 0-0 draw isn't good enough. In fact, a draw isn't good enough. We need 3 points. We've got to go for 3 points. We've got to get 3 points.
And it could be a real turning point if we could get those 3 points.
If we can get those 3 points, I think it will be terrific. And, I always live in hope. And I suppose I say, Robbie, as an Arsenal fan, I travel in hope. I'm miserable as sin for a short period when we lose. And then, my son and I always tend philosophically to say to each other, we've just got to look forward to the next game and hope and pray and cheer for it to be better. But,
100%.
For an Arsenal fan, there is nothing more electrifyingly exciting than thinking about, let alone being present at, an Arsenal-Tottenham game. To me, it's the pinnacle of sporting passion to be there for the game with Tottenham at the Emirates, and I try to go to the game at the Tottenham ground as well.
Yeah. JIDF32 says Xhaka was voted captain. He didn't divide the room. He's going back on the Xhaka thing. Making sense with Thomas says, what's your thoughts on Wilshere training at Arsenal? They said that they're going to let Jack Wilshere train at Arsenal. Obviously, he's had his injury issues. Possibly for him to get back, not necessarily for him, obviously, to come back into the team, but to get his fitness back. He's been so unlucky, hasn't he?
Yeah. I certainly wouldn't begrudge him that. If the club want to offer him that opportunity, I'm well disposed to him. I'm an admirer of his. He was always one of my favourite players. In fact, I remember when my son was much younger, that through a contact of ours, our son got a signed Jack Wilshere shirt because somebody well known to me said, Oliver, do you have a favourite Arsenal player? This was probably 7 or 8 years ago. And my son said Jack Wilshere. And there arrived in the post a signed Jack Wilshere shirt, and Oliver was absolutely thrilled to bits about it. He really revered Jack Wilshere, and I admired Jack Wilshere. I thought he was a terrific player of great talent and real effort. He really did throw himself into it. He was a genuine Arsenal man, but of course, he's always had that vulnerability, that physical vulnerability, and his career has been marred by injury. Is he likely to come back and play for the club? I would have thought he's unlikely. But as to him training at Arsenal, and would I have a problem with that? No, I think he's somebody that should always be respected and hailed by Arsenal fans because he did far more good for the club than not. He would have done more good for the club if he'd had better fortune and greater fitness.
100%.
But, that's just in the past and we just have to accept that. But is he somebody that fundamentally I respect? Yes, I do.
Okay, so many comments coming in today. What's this one here? Gayton says Sambi, I think it's Sambi Lokonga, will end up with the armband. Yes, he's still young, but he showed his maturity when he captained Anderlecht, and the kid is a gem. And new signings-wise, who out of the new signings has impressed you the most?
Well, actually, Lokonga has impressed me because I felt that he's very busy. He seems to me to have a real thirst for the game and for the struggle. He's prepared to get stuck in. There's nothing precious or delicate about him. And he's raw and young, but as has been said, he's already got some experience garnered in Belgium. And so, I think he's got a lot to offer. As to whether he'll one day be the captain, I don't know. But I think he's been a very impressive start.
Aaron Ramsdale?
I think Ramsdale has performed extremely effectively in goal. With the others, I think it's really quite early to say, Tavares, has put in a respectable performance, but I think that there haven't been enough games. Lokonga, I think, has been good. But if I had to pick a standout performer so far, I probably would say that on the occasions that I've seen him, I thought Ramsdale is a good buy.
That was going to be the next question I was going to actually ask you, because obviously it's very mixed when we got Aaron Ramsdale. I remember, I was at the game on Saturday, and this guy turned around to me and he goes, "Right, Robbie, what are you saying about Ramsdale now?" Because I was like, when I saw when they were talking at first, and it was on about 30 odd million, I was like, what, for Ramsdale? I was like, no
and were you partly thinking of him in terms of the club from which he came and
I guess
how many
I
goals
was,
they conceded?
I was. And I have to say, he's been impressive so far. Who starts the North London derby? Ramsdale or Leno?
Personally, I'd go with Ramsdale. Now, when you've got a choice of two, there will be different opinions, and it may well be that some people will say, oh no, John Leno is much more experienced and you should give it to him, certainly much more experienced with Arsenal. I think that when you're on a good run with somebody, when that person appears to be making an effective fist of it, there is a lot to be said preserving that continuity.
Yeah.
And so I would say, with no disrespect to Leno, that you put Ramsdale on for that match. I think that that's important to do. And for what it's worth, who else is it important to have? I think it's important to have Tierney. I think it's very important to have Saka and Aubameyang. And I personally would go, if they're fit, with Aubameyang and Lacazette.
Yeah, they're both
and I would like to see Smith Rowe playing a part in that match. All of those people are of such quality that I think it would be, if not a travesty, something of a waste not to deploy them. And then, of course, you've got to consider, the claims in midfield of Thomas Partey, who's again been grievously afflicted by injury. But fundamentally, that guy has got real quality. He's a very, very, very talented, capable player of some experience. And I think he has not just a steadying influence, but sometimes a pathfinding influence in midfield.
Would you bring back Xhaka? Would you bring back Xhaka for that game? Because I think he'd be available. He would have served his suspension by then. Did he come back in for you?
Probably, yes. Probably I would use Xhaka at some point in the game.
Start, though.
Would I start with Xhaka? I think I'd have to look at the numbers, work out exactly what the formation was going to be. If you ask me to choose between Partey and Xhaka, I would go for Thomas Partey. I'm sorry if that's a slightly indeterminate answer, but that's the answer I give. As you can tell, on that one I am slightly uncertain, because I think Xhaka at his best has got quality, and he is a fighter, and he does put the effort in. And would he be competitive? Yes. My anxiety is about this mercurial streak of his, this tendency to lose his rag and to do something impetuous. And, it may well be that his fans will say to me, oh, don't worry about that, John, he'll be disciplined or self-disciplined on the day, and Arteta can instill that into him. But, it is a trait of his, and it does recur with almost monotonous frequency. So that worries me about him, and I don't think that Thomas Partey would conduct himself in that way.
Yeah. We're running out of time on the show, John. It's just flown past. Alan Moody says, hi, Robbie, silent viewer here. Can we please create a regular slot for Sir John? Right, on the show. Having him has truly been a breath of fresh air. He's captured virtually all the issues surrounding Arsenal spot on.
Well, bless you.
Sir John.
Well, that's very kind. Very kind of you to give me a knighthood, which I have not received and don't expect and haven't asked for. And it doesn't bother me one jot. But I'm very tickled that you should say that. And thank you for your kind words and good spirit. I appreciate it. We'll all have our differences of opinions about players and managers and so on, but we should try to keep these conversations friendly. What I don't like is when I think Arsenal fans sometimes turn on each other, and it can become very abrasive, and it needn't be abrasive. People can honourably hold different opinions about players and managers and teams and formations and tactics and so on. The one thing that should unify us, that should unite us, keep us together, is that we all love this club. It's, to me, it's an important part of my life.
A bit like the House of Commons sometimes, our fans, I mean.
Yeah, a lot of aggression. And, people rounding on each other. By the way, the noisiest member of the House of Commons during my time, I don't know how keen a football fan he is, a very likeable guy, a Labour MP in Hull, called Carl Turner. And Carl would demonstrate to me over a period of years that he was a very good-natured guy, and he was a very hard-working MP, but he would go from 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds, and he used to yell almost every day at the government benches, "Shocking! It's a disgrace," he would say. And then he would point at some hapless government minister sitting on the front bench. He would point at that person and say, "Behave!" whilst conspicuously failing to do so himself. And I frequently had to say to Mr. Turner, "Order! Order! Order! The Honourable Gentleman is a very overexcitable denizen of the House. He must calm himself and recover his composure. I'm worried about him." And I think on one occasion I'm not sure if it was on the floor of the house or in private conversation, but on one occasion I said to him, I strongly urge you to take up yoga. I think you would find it therapeutic. And it would be good for the management of your nerves, man. But actually, to his credit, even though I sort of tore him off a strip now and again, he would always come up to me at the end and say, "Oh, Mr. Speaker, I'm very sorry." He said, "I was absolutely infuriated and disgusted by what the minister had to say." He said, "But as soon as I let rip, I knew that I was in for a bollocking from you."
I'm going to do a couple more. Save J says players should start on form. That means Ramsdale, Tierney, Tomiyasu, White and Gabriel. But John and Robbie, who would your front four be? I think we're running out of time to even do that. Jacob says, John Bercow, surely you must use your articulate talent and intellectual gravitas to serve the public imperative.
Well, you're very kind.
Says spit the truth more often on AFTV. If you're a regular on AFTV, I and many others would be excited, he says.
Oh, right? Well, bless you. I really appreciate that. It's nice to be wanted, and I mean, that's up to the head honcho, the big man,
the great man. We would love to have you
if
back.
If he invites me, I'm always keen.
The invite is always here.
Thank you.
Who's the other Arsenal fans in the House of Commons now? Who's because isn't it Keir Starmer's an Arsenal fan?
Keir Starmer is an Arsenal fan. Jeremy Corbyn's an Arsenal fan.
Yeah.
A number of Arsenal fans, I'm sorry to say, have left the House, although that's true also of fans of other clubs. But there used to be a guy called Jeremy Lefroy, the member for Stafford, who was an Arsenal fan. He's left the House now of his own volition. And a guy called Sam Gyimah, who was a Conservative MP in Surrey, and then he defected. He joined the Liberal Democrats, but he didn't manage to get re-elected to the House. He did a Sol Campbell. So no, the best known Arsenal fans in the chamber are Keir Starmer and Jeremy Corbyn on the Labour side.
What's Boris Johnson then? Who does he support?
Boris Johnson?
Yeah.
I'm not aware that he has a notable familiarity with football.
Oh, I thought he's not a football fan.
I'm not saying that he isn't. I'm not aware of his passion in this matter. I can say only that I've never played football with B. Johnson. I did play tennis with B. Johnson a few years ago at his country residence. And all I can say is I'm not a particularly good tennis player at all, but Johnson took his 6-love defeat with good grace.
He's not exactly Emma Raducanu then.
No, he wouldn't do very well against Emma. He wouldn't win a point against Emma. No, he wouldn't win a point against her. And whether he's any better on the football pitch, I don't know. I've never had a sense, and I don't want to do Boris Alexander de Pfeffel Johnson a disservice, but I've never had a sense that he's particularly passionate about football. I'm not aware that he is. In the House of Lords, Lord Boateng, is an Arsenal fan, and there are various others. But I'm not sure. As you can tell, I'm rather hesitant on the subject of Boris Johnson because I don't recall ever having a conversation about football with him.
Okay.
And
somebody
I just don't know.
Somebody told me one time
key.
he's a Chelsea fan, but I'm like, what's that? Yes. I must be thinking David Miller.
Well, David Miller was certainly
a big Chelsea fan.
And no doubt he still is. And of course, he used to comment on football. He was something of a pundit. I'm quite certain that Boris Johnson doesn't fit into that category at all. On the Labour side, Jeremy's an Arsenal fan. John McDonnell is a Liverpool fan. And the shadow sports minister, who's a friend of mine, a woman called Alison McGovern, who knows a lot about football, she's a passionate Liverpool fan. Everybody knows, I think, that Andy Burnham is a big Everton fan. So no, there are some Arsenal fans still in the House of Commons. I don't think I shall name the Tottenham fans. I don't think I'm going to give them that airtime. I do know a number of Tottenham fans in the House of Commons.
They won't get no more votes, will they, if you name them?
Well, I think that it might be somewhat injurious to their political prospects. And no, I don't wish to name those individuals. I did occasionally draw attention to an Arsenal victory over Tottenham. I remember on one occasion when I called a particular Conservative MP to ask a question, when I couldn't resist saying that I realised that the Honourable Gentleman is probably still stinging somewhat from his club's 4-2 defeat at the hands of Arsenal. Mr. Bob Blackman.
Listen, John, it's been absolute pleasure having you on today. Thank you very much.
Been my pleasure. It's a privilege, Robbie. Thank you.
Your opinions have been brilliant. I loved all the comments today. Thank you to you guys as well.
Thank you.
And let's hope that this weekend we can get that win over Tottenham. I mean, that would be massive, John. That would be really massive. You. John Bercow, ex-Speaker of the House of Commons, massive, more important than that, massive Arsenal fan. We love him here. Thanks for watching the show. Don't forget to subscribe here to AFTV. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time with another News Daily. Thank you.
Thank you. Robbie, thanks.